We often as adults say, oh, it's just play, or we're going to give them a break to play. But play, honestly, is the foundation of how kids are going to learn, how they're going to develop their language. And it is so important.
Hello and welcome to Demystifying Child's Play. I'm Ruth Thurko, and today on the podcast, again, I'm looking forward to chatting with Paige, who's a speech language pathologist, for part 2 of this podcast series. There was so much to cover around language in part 1 that we decided to break it into 2 parts to make it easier to listen on the go. So if you haven't already, make sure you jump back into that previous episode where we talk about the everyday moments method with parent coaching and the 3S strategy, which is stop, simplify, then start, and you definitely want to listen to those. So today we're following on from that chat, talking about one of my favorite topics, how play and language grow together hand in hand. Jumping straight into it, the first time a baby giggles at peekaboo, parents think it's just cute, but we know that there's actually more to that, right?
Absolutely. This is the baby's brain practicing object permanence and turn taking and all the building blocks they need for communication. So, all those moments when they're banging the spoons together or stacking up their blocks or even chasing and popping the bubbles, this is the brain wiring itself for attention and memory and then later language learning.
I love that, and I completely echo all of those things you're saying when I talk about all things play schemas. Play is the absolute foundation for children's brains because all of those wires begin to connect through play. And my listeners will be very familiar with play being pivotal in learning about the world through play schemas. But if you are new here and you want a head start, make sure you head to playschemas.com/free. That's play, schemas.com/free for a bunch of freebies to get you started. Because as we know, play is the base, but we're just getting into talking about how play and language work together. So can you explain how play is so important, so powerful for learning language?
Absolutely. So, play is just the brain's lab and a chance to explore. So, like I said, it strengthens attention and memory and self regulation and social connection, which is the foundation of language learning. And so, when babies are exploring with all of their senses, when they're getting muddy and they're having those sensory experiences, they're strengthening all the synapses that they need to build images in their brains and then attach words to it, which is language building for later on. So, think about it this way: when a baby is learning something new, and even when we know our babies are putting everything in their mouths because they want to feel things and explore, and that's the best way they do it, they are creating all these little pictures in their brains. And then later, they need to attach a word onto these pictures so they can recall things together. So, I like to think about this learning in babies as an octopus. So, with all these different tentacles, we can provide babies with how something smells and how it sounds and how it feels and how it even tastes. And then when we attach a word to it, all of these experiences babies can pull and draw out that word, which is why it's so important to have these sensory experiences as babies. Because if we just see a picture of something on a screen or in a book and don't get the chance to explore it fully, then we only have one little synapse or tentacle to pulling up that image. But if we have 8 different ways to explore it, then if a baby smells an orange, they might know it's an orange. Or if they see an orange or feel an orange, they would know it's an orange. But again, we're just trying to build all the ways that a baby can pull up a word in their brain.
I have a bit of a giggle with you explaining a child being like an octopus, because when I think that, I originally think about this little child like squirming when you're trying to get a nappy on or squirming when you're trying to get clothes on. But it's actually quite good having that image thinking about language too, because when I have my child squirming, I can be like, oh, you're a squirming octopus getting clothes on. But also, this is great for learning. So with that, can you give an example about what a parent would do for like a simple word or a simple idea using this octopus kind of idea in their head?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give another example as an adult learner. So, if you're driving the car and you have kids in the back playing with a water bottle, you don't even have to see that water bottle, right? You know exactly from the crinkle of it and the sound, you know that it's an empty water bottle they're playing with. And again, this is because in your brain, you have seen a water bottle, you've crumpled it, you've heard it, so you can pull up what that word is. So same thing that we're trying to do for kids is we're trying to just give them as many experiences with these words so that they can pull them up.
So what you're saying is these children, these babies need sensory maps, which I love because we're talking about play. It's not like we're going to sit them down and go, here's a drink bottle. This is the sound it makes. Here's a drink bottle. This is its lid. Here's a drink bottle. We're doing it all through play. So how does this play then connect to that language development?
Yes. So play and language grow together because they truly rely on that back and forth interaction. So from the earliest stages, the caregiver and the child play routines are the easiest way that your child is going to learn language. So really from those first few months where they're babbling, And then you're babbling back to them and just repeating what they're doing and having those interactions. When your baby first starts to smile at you and when they're engaging in those peekaboo early social games, that is all setting the stage so well for language development. So, those peekaboo plays is actually building what we call joint attention, which means your child and you can look and share the same attention and focus on something. And so, what we know is that a child's joint attention at 10 and 11 months old actually predicts how much vocabulary they might have in the later years because joint attention is when we are looking at the same thing, they will then understand and take in the words that we're going to model to them. If a child has poor joint attention and they can't focus on the same thing that you are, then they're not going to tune in when we model these words for them later on.
That joint attention is such a key. Our children's brains are being bombarded with things that want their attention, especially when they're so used to watching screens and they've got flash, flash, flash. This happens. Everything in this world happens so fast. So being able to engage with them needing joint attention is so key. So you're saying that something as simple as peekaboo is actually wiring their brain for those words?
Yes, and any of those social games with, parents and caregivers, that early level, are so important for setting the foundation because you're getting that back and forth turn taking, and again, that attention building skill set is such a huge one in learning language. And as kids grow, play changes. So toddlers are then linking play ideas. If they put Teddy into bed and then they cover him up, this sequence would come right before using 2 words together like Teddy sleep. If they're going to start feeding Teddy, that would come before we would say, Teddy eats. And then even later with pretend play, when we're using a block as a phone or we're using all the different boxes as spaceships, this is going to help kids practice storytelling and taking a different role, having flexible thinking and social skills. And most importantly, it's an opportunity to practice using language that we might not see in every single day routine. So, both through storybook reading and pretend play, kids get to practice being somebody that they're not and taking on different roles, using new vocabulary and exploring that play as well.
That is so key, and that's something I really relate to with talking about play schemas as well, is knowing these stages of play. Is that children don't suddenly come into this world and suddenly go, right to this higher level where they've got all those foundations. Those building blocks need to be there in play and in language again, because they go hand in hand. So when you're knowing the stages, when you're knowing where they're just trying to grasping and learning and getting those little bits, all of them are so important for being those building blocks that build them, as you said, academically later, but play now, and that you're not again sitting down and teaching them this lesson where they need to learn and they need to retain and they need to regurgitate and they saying, as we said in the last episode, say this and they have to repeat. We're not talking about that at all. We're talking about play and naturally weaving it to everything. So you're saying that you use coaching to help families with play and language. So what strategies would you teach in those coaching sessions?
Perfect. So, things I like to touch on with parents are really to follow their child's lead because, as you just said, when a child is interested in something, it is 100 times easier to teach them those words that go with it. Another thing that we talked about in the last episode was really making comments in play versus asking a lot of questions. When you're going to join your child in play, the best thing you can do is to give them the words they would say if they could. So, what words could they match to their actions in play? If it's night when they're putting all their animals to bed, or if it's cooking words like stir, scoop, squish when they're doing their pretend play, just really commenting on what they're doing versus asking them a lot of questions. And that makes them want to stay with you and engage in the play. Another idea is to expand on their play. So if they are saying ball, you could say roll ball or big ball or squish ball. And you're just adding one more word. And also, we can add one more idea to their play. So if a child is playing in a very similar way over and over again, I love to first match what they're doing because we don't want to come in and take over, but match what they're already doing and then add one more little idea. And that is often well reciprocated by kiddos because that is just a small change we can add. I also love to teach parents to use a lot of repetition so that we can give those words over and over again in different ways. Another strategy is to expand on what your child is doing in both the language and the play. So if a child is using one word like car, 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 we might add some language to it. Car goes up, car goes down, crash, boom, and just adding some new words to their repertoire so they have more ideas to play with. I also like to add one idea to their play ideas. Sometimes when we're just exploring play, we might do the same thing over and over again. And it can be so powerful to come in with your own toy Copy and match what your child's already doing, and then just add one new idea to give them some new things to try. And lastly is just to increase that attention span. So aim for some longer turns. If we can get 5 to 10 back and forth, that is really setting up a child for success in conversation later on.
I love that. And I love just hearing everything you're saying because, again, it aligns so much with what I believe about play is being able to join the child where they're at and knowing how they're playing. So even if you're wanting to stretch them or change things, you're doing them in the lane that they're in. If they're in trajectory play, you're staying with that. If they're in rotation, you're staying with that. So you're staying where they're comfortable with, where their brain is naturally wanting to work through. You're just expanding, adding, putting little bits at a time. And I love what you're saying. So pretty much there, you're saying comment, expand, repeat, and stretch, which just sounds so doable in everyday play.
Absolutely. Yeah. It can be a lot of fun if we just, again, join in what our kids are interested in and give them the language they might need.
And are you all about fancy toys?
No, good point. The actual opposite. You do not need any fancy toys. And such a good thing to think about is, the Tupperware drawer when the kids just want to take out all the things from the kitchen. Those are the best toys. When we give a kid a fancy toy at Christmas time and they just want the box and the wrapping paper, right? We can just go with that and really let their imaginations explore. So I often actually encourage parents not to have any toys that talk. And if they do have battery operated toys, I often just take those batteries out because the more the toy does, the less a child has to do. And it takes out all that pretend play. So I often encourage no toys that talk and the most simple, basic things to explore and have imagination with.
I am so with you there. Even just no toys that make sound. Our kids can imagine they can make the sounds themselves. My 2-year-old just turned 2 and he got a wonderful, very loud fire engine for his birthday, which has 3 buttons that make different sirens. And it's favorite thing for him to do the first thing every morning, which is not what I want to hear. So we've got a few of those in our house, but they're not ones I would intentionally bring in. And on that line, one thing I'm a big believer for is exactly what you're saying, is that Tupperware drawer is the best place to play. And I'm a big advocate for saying the only difference between what's in your Tupperware drawer and what you use during the day is some hot soapy water. So if it all comes out and you're worried about that, chuck it in the sink, chuck it in the dishwasher. It becomes an everyday item again. But those everyday items are what your children are naturally drawn to. They want to be like you. They want to use what you're using. So let them in that drawer as long as your sharp knives are away and just use some hot soapy water or the dishwasher and they're back in rotation again. So we've talked a lot about getting that everyday language into your kids, but let's have a specific think about those kids that aren't talking yet. So I'm a big advocate about play being our children's first language, and I know you are too because we've been talking all through that. So can you give some playful ideas around how to support this language development if they, I want to say, should be talking, but they're not yet?
Yes, absolutely. And so one of the things that we talked about earlier was those social games. So going back to that people play, which people play just means that it's the adult and the baby playing together and you don't even need toys. Sometimes those are the best things to do with a child who has language delay because the toy can get in the way. If all of our attention is on the toy, then we're not going to have those opportunities to get your child really looking at you and focusing on you and being able to copy and imitate you. So if you get rid of the toys and just do some people play, that can be the best place to start. So some early ideas for that, just even a high five game where we're going to help our child just give high fives and then we just change one thing. So if they're really good at giving you high fives, maybe you then add high fives to all their stuffies or to some new people in the room. So that can be one thing we start. And then another one is just what I call verbal routine. So those are things where we're going to use the same language over and over and over again, and then leave off the end of the word. So another one would be boo games. So it's just a peekaboo game, but then you can offer them a chance to take a turn. So you could either cover up your face or their face with your hands or a little blanket, and you're going to ask, "Where's baby?" And you can use their name. And then when you pull up the blanket or open your hands, you just say boo. And that's something that they can participate in as well.
And I'll just add a top tip there is if you've got little kids, what you can do is use a scarf or something that's a bit sheer so they can still see your face through because sometimes kids get a legitimate fright if they're little or if they're not expecting it and they're like, oh my goodness, that boo was just out of nowhere. But where they can still see your face a little bit, it can be really handy. And then also they can still see those lip patterns as well through that scarf. So if they're older, if they're used to the game, use anything you want. But if they are a bit younger or if they are likely to get startled, using something they can kind of see through definitely does help. So what's your next one?
Well, that's a great tip too, just even in going back to when we're developing skills and talking about object permanence. which means
Mm.
something goes away and teaching a baby it's going to come back. This is sort of at that stage where if mom leaves the room and babies panic because they think they're never coming back, this is something so great that peekaboo can teach because you go away and then you come back. And so those are those early developmental kind of brain games that we're playing with baby that actually matter so much. So another thing you could do is cover an object instead of your face because you can do that together, right? So put that scarf over top of a cow. Say, "Where's cow?" And then you pull it off and go, "Boo!" Or "There he is," or "Cow," or something like that, where you can cover different objects together and play that way. So it's also kind of a fun one.
Which again links directly into play schemas because that's the enveloping play schema where you can hide things and then they can come out again. They're learning their object permanence. And as you're saying, that mum or dad will go away and it will come back again. So again, knowing these play schemas and then putting them with language development just is hand in hand because it just makes things so much easier when you've got that base of knowledge and you're like, okay, they're doing a lot of this themselves. Let's then put this into play where we can work on this language development. Okay, so you've given me 2 ideas so far. Do you have any other ideas?
Let's just another quick little fun one that kids love. So if they're on their backs and we can play with their legs and almost like a train, I love to just do a chugga, 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 chugga. And then we're going to wait and add that pause. We talked a lot about adding a pause in the last episode. And the idea with this is that when we set up these social games, these people games, we're always going to leave a spot for our kids to take a turn. So let's say we're doing that train game where we're using their legs as a train and going chugga, 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 chugga. We're going to pause and then we can add our hand to say choo choo, because that's something that's super fun for kids to copy and participate in, but then easy enough that they can try it too. So then we would play that game the same way over and over, but we're going to leave that wait time, that pause before we're offering our kids to have a chance to participate. And these are called verbal routines. And all a verbal routine is when you play the same way over and over again, but you're intentionally leaving a spot for your child to participate. And that is such a powerful thing for a social game.
And a really good, easy one, if you're just needing some low energy parenting for the day, is simple reading, those simple short picture books that you can read again and again and again. That as a parent, you'll end up learning off by heart. But it gives that chance as well where your children anticipate what that next word is and you'll see them adding it. So I've got one that's the very cranky bear that my 2-year-old loves at the moment. And I'll say the very cranky, and he goes bear, and he knows exactly what happens because we've read it so many times. So he's anticipating what comes next. So you've got that both in that play where you do the chugga chugga choo choo, and then they end
Mhm.
up knowing the choo choo comes next. Or if you're just needing that relaxed time, but you still want to add in some language, pulling out some of those favorite picture books, letting your children choose their favorite picture books and reading them again and again and again on repeat.
Absolutely. Repetition is the key there. And that's exactly how children learn. And just giving them that tiny bit of a turn taking so that you can take the language load, but just leaving them their little spot where they can participate is exactly that. So we've talked about in those social games, you've mentioned the books. Another of my very favorite ways is through songs. And so this can be a real song like Twinkle, Twinkle Little, and we're leaving off the end. Or I make up songs all day in language learning as well. So if I said something like, "This is the way we wash our hands, wash our hands." And the key here is always to just leave a bit of time before you are expecting your child to take their turn. And if they don't say anything and they're just looking at you, you just fill it in. But it gives them a little bit of pause to think about what they could say if they could say it. So just turning all those little songs into routines. And then more routines of just those ready, set, goes, right? Those things we could say all the time. Ready, set, go. And again, we're just leaving that pause because eventually they can fill in that last word. So we can do this strategy in all these things, like you said, play, books, songs, and just our routine language.
All of that is such a great reminder that play isn't an extra part of your day. It's how we just incorporate everything our day and it's how children learn. And when you were saying ready, set into that pause, I wanted to say go myself. So I wonder how many listeners were the same, how many people said go. So if you were someone that said go, let us know because as we know with adults, we've got so many foundations already. We've been using our language for many years. And so we know those next words, we know what comes next. And so it can be really hard yourselves not to say those next words and to give those pauses. But the more you practice, the easier it becomes. We can both assure you that. So give it a go. So again, I asked you last time if there was one message you could leave everyone with, what would it be? So today, if there was one thing from today, what would you want to leave the parents with?
I think just knowing all of those things that you're already doing, We often as adults say, oh, it's just play, or we're going to give them a break to play. But play, honestly, is the foundation of how kids are going to learn, how they're going to develop their language. And it is so important. So, one thing is just leaving enough time to get the play going. Snippets of playtime are often not enough. So, giving your child a long period of time to get into the play is so important. And knowing how powerful it is, not just play, but knowing that every tower you're building and every pretend play scenario you're going through is truly setting the stage for communication and connection.
There is so much to take away from today, and I think play is key, is that biggest one, as you're saying. And also knowing that as an adult, we're saying that pause can be awkward to begin with. Playing with your kids can be awkward to begin with, especially if you've kind of got a 9 to 5 job and you're tired at the end of the day and you're like, that's the last thing I want to do. But being able to just take off those work clothes, maybe put on some home clothes, having something to get you into the mind of play, and being able to give your child that time, because their play is their language, it's their communication, it's how they connect with you, they connect with the world, and they're learning language. So shake off that bit that makes you feel a bit awkward, a bit like, oh, this is not quite who I am, and get into it. The more you do it, the easier it will become. And we can promise you, the more you put language in, the more development you'll see. I've loved seeing with my 2 boys who are 4 and 2, just how their language has grown and grown and grown. Recently, my 4-year-old was looking at a map, and we had the bigger side on one side, and then you flip it over and it zoomed in on the city. And he said to me before we turned it over, Mum, if you turn it over, you'll be aghast. And I was like, sorry, what? What will I be? And he said, aghast. I was like, what does aghast mean? He's like, you'll be very surprised. I was like, oh my goodness, you are 4 and you're using words like that. But that shows you the power of playing with your child and being able to add different language in and using stories and having so much exposure. And I think just the last thing from me, I'd say, is that I'm all about independent play, knowing your child, how they can play and what they love helps them with independent play. But I'm also all about family play and playing with your child. And there's times in the day for both. Sometimes they do just need a brain break and they need that time just to be able to play on their own, play silently, or they might verbalize their own play, but they do need that play with you as well. Thank you so much, Paige, again for coming on. This has been a wonderful 2-part series, and I can't wait for everyone to listen to it. Again, there is so much we covered today. So if you're wanting to go back, you can look at the show notes at playschemas.com/blog. That's play, schemas.com/blog. And I'll have the links to Paige and everything about how to find her also below this episode. But Paige, can you just remind us, where would we find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram, I'm sharing daily tips and tricks all the time. And actually, I'm just starting a new series about everyday things to use around the house for language. And I just did a video on tape, how we can use a roll of tape to do all the language ideas. So check those out on Instagram. And if you message me play, then I can actually send you a little parent package with some starter handouts. I also have a website, talkfirstwords.com. And on Instagram, it is talkfirstwords. And so you can message me there and we can keep going with all the play ideas.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening in today. Remember, today is a great day to play. It's a great day to play with your kids. Put in that language, no matter how you feel, we can shake it off and we can get into this language development and play and connection. So have a wonderful week.